All right, hi sixth graders. Today we're going to be looking at changing fractions to percents and decimals to fractions, and we're going to be converting all of our fractions, decimals, and percents just as a review because we're going to get a little further into percents of numbers this week and using fractions. So it's good to kind of refresh our skills and wake our brains up to this, as I know we haven't really been learning new concepts for a bit. So let's get started. If you haven't done so already, you need to have a composition notebook and be filling out your table of contents. We have been using this in all of our accelerated math, so we need to make sure we are keeping it up because we will be using this when we come back in person. So just make sure that no matter what you put on the page, you have your title, your page number, and then it's in the table of contents. So today we're going to be doing fractions, decimals, and percents. Fractions, decimals, and percents, and I double check just to make sure every time that I didn't miss one, but this will be going on page 4. And if it goes on to a different page and you end up doing 2 pages, you can put pages 4 to 5. Okay, so this one's going to be a little bit of writing, so if you do a few pages, that is fine. Okay, so I need to title it, make sure it's the same. Fractions, decimals, and percents. Okay, great. And if you want to, you can write converting at the top so you know that's what you're doing, because that's what we were doing, but I just didn't title it that. I just did fractions, decimals, and percents. And then again, this is page 4. All right, so let's get started. So we're going to be sectioning this off a little bit, and I have my handy dandy ruler right here. If you want to grab a ruler or something, even just another book will help you to have a straight edge as we divide up our page a little bit. If not, just try and do it as neatly as possible to kind of help yourself out. So I am going to do it just over the red line, barely a little bit. I'm going to do 3 columns, but I don't necessarily need them to be even. So I have my first one. And then I will do it at the top just because I like to have it look uniform. Okay, perfect. And then I will probably do about right here, so about half of these ones. Great. All right, okay. Whatever you are using, just put it to the side because we'll be using it again. So we're going to first look at changing percents to decimals. So I'm going to write here percent, or you can write out the whole word too if that helps you, so I can do that. So percent to decimal. All right. Okay, so here's where I'm going to put my notes. So my notes for this one are, so this is where you will find what operation you need to do or what conversion you need to do. And then here's where you'll find your notes and your example. So move the decimal to the point, or move the decimal point two places to the left. So when you do this, you are actually dividing by 100. And I can show you why we are doing that here in a second with our example. So this is what you're doing when you are changing from a percent to a decimal. So we have 48%, and we need to get that into a decimal. So this actually we can see as over 100, right? And if we have a decimal right here, so we're going to change this 48% sign. We're going to change that percent into a little decimal, right? But we have to move it 2 places to the left because when we get 48%, it won't be 48 as a whole number. Because if it was a whole number, it would have to be bigger than 100, right? Because we would have 100%. So we need to move this to the left 2 places because we are dividing by 100. So we would see 48 out of 100%. So then now our decimal is here, and we have 0.48 0.48 or 48 hundredths. See, out of 100. So if I wrote this as a fraction, it would be 48 out of 100. And then this place, we know right here, is 100ths place. So now I'm going to section off this spot, and I am going to work on my decimals to percents. So now we need to know how to go back. So decimal to percent. And, you know, throughout the year, you might need to use this every now and then. So this is such a good resource to have. So make sure you are keeping up with the notes, because this is very beneficial. Even going forward, if you have to change your fractions, decimals, and percents and do conversions, even maybe in 7th grade, I think that this will be a very useful thing for you to use, the notebook. So move the decimal point two places to the right. So when you do this, you are actually multiplying by 100. If this kind of confuses you up until we get to the divide by 100 or multiply, just kind of maybe ignore it then. That's just explaining why you do it. So this time, on the opposite hand, I have 0 and 3/10 or 0.3, and I want to get this into a percent. So I need to multiply it by 100 or move it over. So I am multiplying it to the right instead of dividing this time. So I'm putting it over 2 times, and where there is an empty space, you need to put a 0, and so we get 30%. So you're multiplying by 100. So it's, again, 30 hundredths, right? And then we have 30 over 100%. Okay, so it's 30% of the pizza instead of 100% of it, which is awesome. Okay, and again, this should be review for you guys, so I completely understand if you've seen this before. We just need to go over it again because we're going to be using it a little bit when we get into percents. Okay, so percent to fraction. So we're going to do percent to, and then fraction. All right, and I think that this one is pretty easy, and I kind of like it. So our first step, we have 2 steps with this one. So our first step is to put the percent, I'm just going to put the percent sign over 100 and drop the sign. And then your second step is that you are going to reduce the fraction. And if I ever go too fast, you can pause the video and keep writing your notes. Okay, so to reduce, to first put the percent over 100. So let's look at it. So we have 8%. That's the example we're going to do. Okay, so we have 8%. And I want to get this into a fraction. So I need to put this over 100. So 8% out of 100. When we think about percents, we always think 100%. So 100% is like an A on an assignment. You got no problems wrong. You got 100% of them right. So you got all of them right. So this is only 8% out of the possible 100. So you put 8 over 100, right? So we say put the percent over 100 and drop the percent sign. So that's just what we did. So now I have a fraction. But this is not a fraction in the simplest form. So we need to simplify it. So I'm going to divide it by, well, they're both even numbers. I see that. But I think that 4 goes into 8 and 100. So I'm going to divide them by 4 so that I can get it in the simplest form. So 8 divided by 4 we know is 2, and then over 25. Okay, so 8% over 100, right? So then we drop the percent sign, 8 over 100, and simplified. Awesome. Okay, so now I'm going to put my line so that I can move on to my next section. All right, and now we are going to do fraction to decimal. Oh. Oh, actually, we're going to do fraction to percent. I wanted to make sure I didn't miss any. So fraction to percent. All right. So for fraction to percent, we're going to first, again, 2 steps for this one, multiply to get a denominator of 100. And then our second step is that the new numerator is the percent. Okay, so let's look at an example so this makes a little more sense. There's another method to finding a percent from a fraction, but it's an extra step. So this is the easiest step that we're going to use right now. If you do a little bit of a different way where you divide, that works too, but we're just going to do this method right now. So you have, let's do the fraction of 1/5. Okay, so to get this, I need to have a denominator of 100. So our first step is multiply to get a denominator of 100. So this also can be seen as kind of a division. So 100 divided by what is 5, right? Or 5 times what is 100. Just from my math facts, I know that 5 times 20 is 100. But whatever I do to the bottom, I always have to do to the top so I get a fraction whole, right? Okay, so now I have 20 over 100. Again, because we were working with percent, so when we were using fractions, we have to make it out of 100 so that we can see what the percentage would be. So we see that it is 20%. So we just kind of, the new numerator is the percent. So that's step 2. The new numerator is the percent. So 20 out of 100 or 20%. All right, so if someone took a really big test out of 100 and they got 20 of the questions right, then they got 20%. Sometimes it's easier to think about things in terms of what we use frequently, and you guys are familiar with tests. So now we are going to work on fraction to decimal. This is our second to last one, so just hang on a few more minutes. Okay, fraction to decimal. So we have, again, one step that we are going to divide the numerator by the denominator to get a decimal. So divide the numerator by the denominator to get a decimal. All right, so let's do a practice with this. So let's have the fraction of 2/5. Okay, so first step is divide the numerator by the denominator. Okay, so I'm going to divide the numerator, which is my 2, divide it by my denominator of 5. Okay, so I know that 2 can't go in, or 5 cannot go into 2. 2 is smaller, so that's not possible. So what I can do is I can add a decimal point right here and a 0, because any number without a decimal behind it really has an invisible decimal. So like 5 would have an invisible decimal point behind it because it's a whole number, right? There's just no decimal, so there's no part of a whole. It's just 5 wholes. So this is 2 wholes. So we're going to add our decimal point and add a 0. And 5 can't go into 2, so I have to remember to put my 0 and work to the right. 5 can go into 20 though, and I know it can go in 4 times. So I'm going to check my work and do 5 times 4 is 20, subtract, and I get 0. So that means I can move my decimal point up, and I have 0.4 or 4/10. So that is my decimal. So when you're doing your fraction to your decimal, just divide the numerator by the denominator. All right. And last but not least, we're going to do fraction to, or decimal to fraction. Okay, so decimal to fraction. All right. Okay, so first I'm going to use the place value. This one's kind of lengthy. So use the place value of the decimal to write the denominator as a fraction. So an example of this, if we're at our 10th spot, so if we're using tenths, right? So like 0.1, that's what a tenth is. It's just one place after the decimal point. And then we have 10 as our denominator. If we're in hundredths, then it's 100 as our decimal, or as our denominator. Okay, and then after we do that, we're going to say that the numbers to the right of the decimal are the numerator, and lastly we are going to reduce. Okay, so let's see that as an example. So I am going to use my decimal of 6/100ths. So one thing you need to make sure is you're realizing that our second place behind the decimal point is our hundredths place, THS. So because it's our hundredths place, I am going to put it over 100. So when I turn this into a fraction, I'm going to do 6/100, right? Because it's 6, if I divided 6 by 100, I would get 6/100ths. So 6/100, and then I need to simplify this. So remember, the numbers to the right are the numerator, so that's why I dropped off the decimal. So I have 0.6, right? Or 6. If it was 16, so it was 16/100ths, then I would still need to put that there. But just because it's a 0, it's kind of invisible. All right, and then you drop the decimal. So that's why I have that. So just wanted to make sure there's no confusion. I'm going to simplify by 2. Okay, so when I simplify, 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 100 divided by 2 is 50. Okay, so that is it in its simplest form. All right, so you're going to do a couple practice problems with this. Again, this is review, but this is something that's very useful to have as you go forward in your math this year and even in the future. So please reference this, and if you have any questions, reach out to your math teacher.